Going live. Let's do it, baby.
All right.
Evening.
Hello, everybody. This is episode 2 of Comics Dello Morte, Horror in Space. I am Crimson Owl Comics, and here's my co-host, Jason Alexander, Fallbreaker Studios, and Robert Ogre. How you guys doing, guys?
Doing awesome.
Good.
How's it going, y'all?
Awesome. And here is our intro. Awesome.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Good job, Ronnie.
Yeah, you killed
Yeah.
that, Ronnie.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
All right. Well,
So, first off, hi, Frank in the chats.
Frank, what's
Hey.
going on, man? Thanks for stopping by.
Frank saying nice intro. Thank you.
mhm.
So, with the intro, horror in space, yes, because the 3 stories is pretty much, have to do with a lot of, space travel and, that old time question, are we truly alone in space? So, I'm going to let you go off, Jason, and pretty much read the first story. So, go ahead.
Yeah, the first story it's all script, so there's no picture. So I figured I would just read it, but it's a good little story. So here it goes. It's called The 24th Guest by the Teller of Tales. Jim Wilson was unusual when it came to reporters. He had a mind like a steel trap and a nose for news that couldn't be matched. That's what made him the finest newspaperman who ever lived. Jim isn't around anymore. He's gone, vanished like one of the missing persons he had been looking for. His old editor still wonders whatever became of Jim, hopes that someday his greatest reporter will come back. But Jim Wilson isn't coming back, ever. I know. I was there when he found the clue to his last story. That's why Jim isn't coming back. He was too good of a reporter. He couldn't be allowed to walk on Earth and write his stories. He knew too much. He had to disappear. He disappeared. Jim found the last clue in the little lunch wagon opposite Central Park, just across the street from the entrance to the park zoo. He was sitting there, drinking a cup of coffee, when Ian Martok, the science editor of the paper, walked in. "Hello, Jim," Ian said. "What are you doing around here this late?" "Have a cup of coffee," Jim replied. "The night's young. It isn't 12 yet." "Don't mind if I do," Martok said, sitting down on the stool beside Jim. The waitress brought over a cup of coffee and placed it in front of Martok. "Following a story?" Martok asked, stirring his coffee slowly. "A hot one," Jim replied. "So hot, I'm a little scared." Martok gave him a short, sharp whistle. "That good, eh?" "Better," Jim said. "I'm just wondering whether to call Washington or to the editor. I don't think either one will believe me." Martok shrugged his shoulders. "Well, I'm just a science editor, not a reporter. I hope you know what you're doing." Jim scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You know, maybe it's a good thing I bumped into you." "Me?" Martok asked. "You," Jim repeated. "But first, I want to ask you a question. What are you doing around here?" "Why, I live just a block down the street. I thought I'd stop by for a cup of coffee." Jim scratched his chin for some more and brooded silently. And he turned to Ian. "I'm going to let you in on my story." "Oh no, if it's as hot and as dangerous as you hint, I'm including myself out of it. I just want your opinion. If that's all you want, okay," Martok agreed. "Well, it began about a week ago," Jim said. "I got suspicious of the reports put out by the Missing Persons Bureau." "Suspicious?" Martok asked. "What was unusual about them?" 3 weeks ago, the number of people who disappeared for no apparent reason jumped. I went through the weekly reports going back for the last 10 years. I got a general average of the number of people usually reported missing, but the figures for the past 3 weeks ran 24 persons over that average. Could be a coincidence. Could be, but I don't believe it. I checked on everyone on the list, usually for some reason for a person disappearing, but I found 24 people had absolutely no reason for disappearing. And these 24 people were the kind who are useful. Useful? I don't get it. Doctors, nurses, engineers, machinists, 12 were men, 12 were women, all were unmarried, Jim explained. And it was the same for each of the past 3 weeks, Martok asked, becoming interested. Exactly, Jim said. So I figure it isn't a coincidence. I figure some more and find that there's a story somewhere. What brought you here? Martok asked. A girl named Jean Morgan. Jean Morgan? Martok said. That name sounds familiar. It ought to, Jim remarked. You wrote an article about her a week ago, and her glass steel experiment she had been doing in some laboratory. Of course, that's the girl who discovered a glass as strong as steel. Correct, Jim said. I've been following her around for a week. Why? I had a hunch that she was going to disappear, Jim said. So I followed her here. Martok looked around. Except for the two of them, the lunch wagon was empty. I don't see her, Martok said, puzzled. She went across the street to the zoo, Jim said. So did some other people. I counted 23 going inside. But the zoo is closed at this hour, Martok said. Not for 23 people, Jim said. I saw them go in, and I might have missed one. I know Dr. Darton, the curator of the zoo, Martok said. You want to call on him? I was thinking of doing that when you walked in here, Jim laughed. That's when I thought of maybe calling the FBI or the editor. Come on, Martok said. You've made me curious enough to stick my nose into your story. Let's have a talk with Mr. Darton. Jim tossed a quarter on the counter and followed his friend out. Only the light from the zoo's curator house could be seen as they approached. The lights on the lamp were broken, but once on the path, they had no trouble finding the door of Dr. Darton's house. A touch on the bell, and soon the door was opened. A slight, handsome man stood in the doorway. Ian Murtock, he exclaimed. Come in. Glad to see you. Bring your friend in, too. It's a bit late for a call, Martok began to apologize. I've got other guests, Dr. Darton interrupted. You're welcome. He led Jim Wilson and Ian Martok down a carpeted passage. Throwing an open door, he motioned them into a large living room. Jim stopped in the doorway, somewhat startled, for across the room, smiling at him, was Jean Morgan. Martok, he whispered, that's the girl I told you about. She's here. Martok chuckled. Well, go over to her and say hello. There was no need for that. For the moment Jean saw them, she started across the room towards the newcomers. Hello, Jean. I know you. You do? Jim stammered. Of course, she replied, laughing. You've been following me for a week. Well, let me introduce myself. I know who you are, Jim said. I'd like to know why you're here, though. Jean smiled. Perhaps Dr. Darton can explain. She motioned, and Darton and Martok joined them. Jim Wilson wants to know why I'm here, she said. Tell him, Dr. Darton smiled. She turned to Jim, then, and the smile left her face. Suppose you knew that the next war, an atomic war, would probably destroy all life on this world, Jim. What would you do? I try to stop that war at any cost. That's right. What else would you do? Would you take out some form of, let's say, insurance to make sure that if a war does come, not all humans would die? Swiftly, Jim's eyes swept around the room, studying each face there. Do you mean that you and these others, he gestured to cover everyone there, are the insurance? Yes, Jean said. Every week for the past 3 weeks, 24 of us are picked to leave this earth. Where do you go? To Mars. Mars? We don't have interplanetary travel. What about spaceships? Jim floundered in his search for the right words to express his confused thoughts. We don't have spaceships, Jim, but our Martian friends have, and they are kind enough to help us, Jean said. I don't believe it. It's true, Jim, Ian Martok said quietly. I am a Martian. And I, Dr. Darton said. Somebody is pulling a gag on me, Martok, Jim said with a nervous smile. It's no gag, Jim, Jean said, taking his arm. Come over here, to the window. It's almost 12 and this spaceship is due in. A flying saucer, Jim. They walked to the window, Jim beginning to enjoy the situation for Jean was pretty enough to make him tingle all over at the touch of her hand. As they approached the window, there was a gentle hush, as though the air around the building suddenly felt lighter. A moment later, a round dull object settled on the grass lawn not far from the house. The spaceship, Jean announced. The others in the room gathered up their small belongings and walked through the door and outside. Martok, Darton, and Jean came to stand beside Jim at the window. Do you believe it now, Jim? Martok asked. Yes, I believe, but no one will believe the story I'll write, Jim said. You're not going to write the story, Jim. Not for our paper anyway, Martok announced. What do you mean? Jim asked, turning on him quickly. Did you count the passengers? Yes, said Jim. 22. And Jean, I guess, is going, he said, turning her. That makes 23. And you make 24, Jim Wilson, Dr. Darton announced. It is time, Jean Morgan said. Jim Wilson had no power to resist as Jean took him by the arm and led him across the lawn to the spaceship, the last few steps he took on Earth. The end. That's a story. 100%. I loved it.
Oh yeah.
I loved it, and then I loved it. Like everything is on the money. No holes. I checked it. I looked at it up and down. There's no holes. That's a damn good story, y'all.
Yeah, that was what was that? 1950.
So, what do you like about the story?
52. Okay.
Yeah.
1952. Yeah, because the first man didn't go into space until I believe 1961,
or 60,
which was a Russian Russian astronaut. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw everything, and it's like it's so hard to do that. Like I didn't really it didn't require your imagination to see everything in this story. It's like it's explained without forcing it, but everything is explained, like everything except for the number of steps people took. Like everything is there, and it's 2 pages. Like it's just a good read. Like it's just a good read. It's an episode of the Twilight Zone.
Exactly. It's definitely an episode of the Twilight Zone. And for any readers out there, for a lot of these older comics, they would have pretty much what's called text stories that would be no art at all, and they would just have basically the title of the story and just text for a story for the reader to read, and then they would have just the regular comic books in there as well. So it was a really good story. I liked it a lot.
I dug it. Yeah.
And something else, like throughout the different comics, for some reason I guess this was like the standard thing, but the stories are always on yellow, like it's always yellow, like the paper's yellow. Like for the stories, like across companies and everything, it was like, I guess that was like their standard or something. I need to look into that.
Yeah, and it also made me think, I mean, maybe someone out there that's watching, if like I was going to ask someone, like maybe the people that were posting it to the websites, that probably these companies back then would let like upcoming comic book writers, like, hey, if you write this story and if the readers like it enough, we'll let you, work with this artist. and we'll let you like actually have some like images that come with that art, with that story now, because you actually got the readers interested in what you're actually writing with the other story. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually do that.
I think I did see a documentary, but I don't remember who it was about. I don't know. I don't think it was. It might have been Jack Kirby. No, I don't know. But like, they were going to work for Marvel, and they needed somebody to write a story.
Yeah,
and they would write them, and like Stan Lee and whoever else it was, it might have been Steve Ditko. They were like, nobody reads that stuff anyway. Like they were like it was a standard thing by that time. They would just throw them stories in there, But it was like some kid that wanted to make a good impression or something, So like, they sometimes are really, really good,
I would do like, so
Frank said that's what it would remind me of, the Twilight Zone, How to Cook Humans.
Exactly. Yeah. Like maybe like part of it for me was like, this is my first experience with like public domain comics, right? Like to really get into them and like flipping through the pages of them and everything. And like, I just assumed like the first couple times that this was just an ad. Like, so I didn't even look at it. I just
because you don't see that anymore, especially in New Age comics.
And so I went through it, and then it was like I like read like through a couple paragraphs on the second page, and I'm like, oh, hold up, like if this is an ad, like what is this an advertisement for? And then when I went back and I noticed that it said it was by the Teller of Tales, so I figured that it was the same guy in purple. So then I read it, and I'm like, whoa, like this is a comic book. Like this is in a comic book, and it fits with all the rest of the stories, the ones before it and the ones after it. Like it does. This is still alien abduction, whether it's happening because there's going to be an atomic war on Earth or not. The aliens could just say that, and they can just take 24 people a week, every week, just because. So it's still got the horror elements there because it's still this uncertainty, because if you're not in the 12, then there's an atomic war coming to Earth, possibly, and that's scary too. So it's a lot in a little bit, and it's awesome. Like who knows if this would make an awesome comic still, like you know what I mean? Like it's just a cool little, it's just a cool little, like a spoonful of like butter pecan ice cream. It's just perfect.
Yep.
Really good. Good job reading it.
Hey, thanks, man. That was fun. That was fun. I like that. So I guess we're done with that story. But so Exiled.
You have any thoughts? What really popped out at you that you liked about it?
It's aliens, man. Like I love like UFOs, man. Like that's where all of my alternative thinking started, was with grabbing a UFO book in the library, and then it was like scary stories to tell in the dark, and then it was like the regular ghost stories. But no, it's like I'm always a sucker for a good alien abduction story, because it's like it's simple, it's sci-fi, it's still scary, just hits all the marks without even being like there's nothing graphic or not even an alien in the book, but it's hits all the marks. Just a solid, I like the presentation of it. It's just a simple formula. I like that it's a simple formula to get A to B to C out, done. Yeah.
And it's like, and it's got that 50s flavor. I mean, it's
exactly.
It's got that, like, classic sci-fi thing.
Yeah, like the guy in the beginning, that he was going to find a way to escape, but in the end, peril, and just you're going to pretty much die or get captured just like everyone else, at the end of like any Twilight episode.
Right. Yeah. And he settled. He's like, okay, well, Jean's pretty enough to spend forever with on Mars, so here goes nothing,
Yeah, pretty much.
They're gonna take me anyway. I may as well find the silver lining to this.
Yeah. All right, so the next story, Exiled to Death. So, what do you guys think about this story?
I liked it. I thought it
Yeah.
was well, first of all, Exile to Death. I mean, that's a great death metal song right there.
Yeah.
But no, it was like it was sort of like I don't know, like it's like I say, I always read the stuff like as if I was in the 50s, like or something, because it's like it's really it hits all of the things, like all the parts of a normal story. Some of it's like I don't know, like like I guess you really don't have a story if things don't happen, but it's like they happen to run into the same place that they found the time machine, and
right.
you know what I mean. Like
pretty much.
It was so like predictable almost, but like not really. Like,
So pretty much for the readers out there, this man and woman are on trial because they're pretty much Earth is dying, and they're on trial because the people are like, your science is against our our laws and everything, because we're in great utopia, everything's great, you're pretty much upsetting the balance of everything that we got going on that's beautiful. Basically almost like that how like the time machine, how he goes into the future and you got all those people that are like happy and not questioning what's going on, and so they basically, it's like, okay, your punishment is that we're going to put you in a time machine and send you into the future. And when they send them to the future, their time machine, exactly. And find out that they were right. The world pretty much died, and they were trying to find a way to get back to their original timeline to show them, hey, here's proof that, hey, our world is dying and we need to stop basically drinking and partying and find ways to like save humanity before everything's gone.
Right.
I mean, it was like, okay, like the story itself was very bare bone. It's like as far as like the actual action in the story, but like the ideas behind it, I think is what made it something. Just the fact that their world was like, they said they've had the machines for thousands of years or whatever. They've never broken yet, but they weren't like, nobody knew how to fix them, or like nobody built them. So if something did happen, they were completely unprepared, but they were so comfortable that they didn't even care about that.
Right.
Exactly.
And okay, Tum Par. That was the name of the guy.
Tum Par.
Tum Par, and the girl's name was Jan Cal. I mean, like Tum. I was laughing.
Tum.
Yeah. And this one, like the first page was they had the narrator hiding in the background, or he's actually in the foreground, but he's
shout out to him to saying my fedora is not appropriate to wear there in the
if you could see him world. just for it, I mean, look at that artwork there. I mean, that's really great that they're trying to hide the narrator in the background, where like he's almost matching with the Rock, but they're finding ways to like have a different shade of purple where he's almost blending in, but not exactly.
His fabric looks a little bit softer than like the terrain around him too, so it's like it catches your eye. So like it's
all right. And if you're gonna show something like that, Ronnie, you got go to the page where he punches through the glass.
Oh yeah. Let me see.
But
right here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let you.
You gotta go down.
Right there. Yeah.
Okay. It looks like he's holding something.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't like a fist.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. It was like, I wonder if he, like, if they had like an idea or something, you know, like, you know,
yeah,
know, like
almost like he had a shake weight.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, could you see the vibration below his hand?
Yeah.
But besides that, just looking at like the textures of like the rocks and everything that they tried to do, you know, it's just back then. It was just really great to see how like they came up with the idea of that stuff.
Yeah, this is like dynamic.
You didn't have computers and to basically give you rock texture and everything. They had to basically do all that stuff by hand.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
and and of course again with the colors, like they didn't have a lot of it, but they had one panel I remember that was just like solid colors.
Yeah.
And it was just like 3 solid colors, but you know, it was like it's I don't know, it's like artistic and a way of saving time too. You know, I mean, they had like a certain amount of time to get these things cranked out.
Like
you know?
like right here. I mean, they wanted to pretty much show you the time machine, but they wanted your focal point to be on the people right there. You know, where it's just basically a solid color, but it's just, you know, the people themselves, because that's where they want you to focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the best thing to do, is not just make this giant scene where it's like, okay, I got to color this blue color, then I got to color this color, and just basically look at everything, because sometimes it's going to take you forever by just coloring everything as so many different colors. Believe me, it will.
And also, you know, it adds a little mystery to it because it's like a darker thing, and like it's something that's not real. So like they'd have to go in and like draw all kind of wires and hoses and, you know, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's cool if you got time. But
if you have time, Yeah, this story. Oh, sorry, Ogre, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it's just kind of like if somebody said, you know, get off of Krypton without Superman. Like this would be, it would be this story. It's like your world is dying. How do you get off of it when you're trying to tell everybody that it's in danger and they won't listen? And they stick you in your time machine and send you into the far future where you were right. Like you were right. So here's your punishment. Like,
so, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So like nobody could practice science or anything like that, because they just didn't want to add any more things to upset the balance of the perfect world and stuff. And,
yeah, because that's pretty much what it was, is that everything was a perfect world, and they thought that science would pretty much screw up, like, you know, question everything, you know? And
man, that's kind of relevant, you know, still.
Right.
Yeah.
Computers, you know, we're just letting them run everything, and most people don't know how to work on a computer or program or anything.
Right.
Just roll with it, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, and I mean, people could debate and everything. I mean, how many people want to debate and argue about the whole global warming thing? You know,
right.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of things relate to, pretty much this story relates to a lot of things that are going on now.
Did y'all think it was weird that the lizards learned how to throw rocks in the far future? Like, why? Like, why would that be a necessary skill for a lizard? Like, what are they doing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Playing outfield? Like, what's going on here?
I skipped over that. Because when he ran up and punched the glass, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, now it's back to business.
Yeah, right.
I'm just like, you're gonna punch glass, and then like, you know, then they get in there, and then of course they find their time machine. But I guess it kind of makes sense. Like, if that's where it happened at, I guess it would be around the same place or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like one of them things. If you think too hard on, you know. It's not supposed to be
pretty much it. Yeah, pretty much it's like that time travel logic, you know.
Yeah.
Is that okay? If I tell myself in the past that if I left something here, then technically in the future it should still be there.
Right.
You know?
And then they
like
they
in
left
that
a piece of
like in that
paper.
Bill and Ted logic, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the paper they had a note, you know, and then they found it in the thing, and it's like, man, paper would not last that long.
Oh yeah, right.
But the thing they brought back was a plaque, so that would, you know, it was like made out of like rock or something.
Yeah, it was made of stone or yeah.
Yeah.
But pretty much solid artwork. Yeah. I really like
as
what
far
they
as
did.
artwork goes, I mean, it's very, very, very 50s. You know,
it's exactly what you would expect if somebody said 50 sci-fi comic. Like, you got it.
And you know, just with the 24 and with this story, it just goes back to like with the whole sci-fi thing, you know, a lot of sci-fi movies coming out during this time period, and just a lot of people not knowing what's really in space, and you know, are we truly alone? Because you know, man didn't land on the moon until the 60s, so you know, a lot of people were freaking out and just didn't know what to do. So yeah, people just used their imagination and let themselves run with it. And then you know, during the 60s, I think it was the 60s, the whole Roswell crash and all that stuff. So yeah.
So they hadn't been to space yet. So it was, and I mean, the only thing they had to look back to was like the ancients and, you know, people that came before them, and they all were the same way about it. You know, it's just an unknown thing, you know.
Right, because you can even tell in like their space age clothes, it kind of starts to go back to like the Egyptian style or like the Mayan style. Like you can see it's like that's just different colors. Like they think that that's what space is, because it's the most out there thing they have is like way, way, way back.
Yep.
Swagger jacking through the ages.
So that one was okay. I mean, like, as far as like the book as a whole, it's pretty low on my you know, top 5. But it was definitely a good one though. I enjoyed the art, and you know, like I said, the story was real simple, but I like the ideas that they were putting. You know. It was a good little read.
It crossed the finish line. Like, you know, it knew that it knew that it wasn't quite gonna win a medal, so it, you know, it tried it through, but
you know, it was, you know, I said, I've read a lot of crap from back then, and it was better than a lot of that. So you know.
I didn't grit my teeth through it, but I didn't need it in my life, and I don't need it.
Just as a whole, this first issue was really good, you know, because I'm telling you, they got some horrible stuff. It's just not good at all, you know.
Yeah, definitely. At the end of this book, we're gonna give a 1 out of 5 what we think of this book.
All right. So the next one is what was like
space travel.
Problems of space travel.
Problems of space travel.
It's the coolest story in the book. Like it, just for like nostalgia purposes. Like it's not much to it for a read. It's pretty short. It's only like maybe 8 panels, 8 panels. Like, and it's just a daydream about how humans will finally make it to space. Totally cool, but you know, cool like a cool T-shirt that you would find at Goodwill.
You know.
And
it pretty much like, for the audience, it's pretty much showing you like how it would be built and everything. And just the way they wrote it, the writer, it sounds like something that you would hear on like a 1950s radio station. You know, it's like, the world is rapidly approaching the era of space travel, but before the modern miracle becomes reality, there are some problems that must be solved. The escape, you know, something like that.
Look at that, man.
That's
Some
so
people need
cool.
to use some effects. You got it right off the bat.
I didn't need to do the effects. I just had to listen to some voices.
That was perfect. No, but yeah, like it's funny because it's not really. It's almost like they put that in there as like an informational thing almost because it's not really a story. It's not really
it's
a horror story
pretty
either.
much that's what it is. It's like it's an informational comic. That's pretty much what it is, and it's really great because I mean, during that time, you really didn't know what you had to do for the comics, so it was great to learn all the different steps. So it's great.
Okay, well, this is the other thing. I was gonna research this before we got on there, but I didn't have time to. Like some of the stuff that they're talking about, if they didn't know about this stuff, this guy was like kind of had an idea.
He's spot on, yeah.
Right.
You know, like getting sick, like only the strongest people could handle it, and you know, like about the fuel and all kinds of stuff. You know, it's like it's pretty. You know, if you didn't know anything and there wasn't the internet and all this stuff, that would have been some good information to have.
You know, like this is the best artwork in the book.
Oh yeah.
This is the most Marvel looking story. Like the lettering, the artwork, like this looks like it could be like the beginning of like an X-Men comic or you know, or like one of the cosmic Marvel stories, like in the Kirby era. Like it's the art is great. The knowledge is, like you said, it's like it's pretty sharp. Like even like the whole life cycle of a man traveling to the nearest star, like from a young man to an old man. Like it's informative, but not like with that, like not really, but it's cool. Like it's so cool to see. Like it just
it's just like it's like a thought-provoking thing with a little, like, you know, facts in it. It's like, I don't know, you don't really, it's nothing to really compare it to. I don't know.
No.
It's like,
I feel like we have everything now. Like this was like space travel is like there's always been a space station and you know, orbiting Earth for the most memorable past, and it's like this is like they didn't even know what a space shuttle was gonna look like. You know, it's like
exactly.
It's very, I don't know, like we don't have like there's all the genies have been let out of the bottle now. You know, it's like there's
the last thing is somebody dying and coming back and telling everybody what happened. You know, like that's about like, you know, or getting farther into space. I mean, you know,
finding a way to.
There's creatures underwater that we, you know, haven't discovered, and there's things, but there's nothing like huge like what's in space. Like that's like a huge thing you see every single day.
Right.
You know nothing about, you know, like I used to not know anything about. Now, you know, you do.
Yeah.
There's nothing really to compare it to. I mean, like it's of its time period, and the story itself. Like, why would they? I mean, it's cool. It's very entertaining, you know,
like, and educational.
And educational, you know? It's like so. It's kind of like they were trying to, like, I don't know, put something like that in a comic, you know. So like, you know, teenagers.
You know, but it probably put it in the consciousness of a bunch of young men to say, okay, well, I gotta fortify myself so that I can make it to space when it's time, you know, like, you know, who knows
it's
who
like,
inspired.
Mom,
you know?
I just read this comic book. I want to go to space camp.
Right, because then the next picture is like, get your muscles. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's like, go to, like, in order to get to space, you got to have some muscles. You tired of being skinny? Like, let's get you to a He-Man body. Like, I'll go to space.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because it says here, only the strongest of men could withstand the sudden acceleration of a rocket takeoff. Even pick crews will black out temporarily. So, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they were, like, pretty spot on with some of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think even he put, like, the amount of fuel it would take. And,
you
know.
And how many light years and all that stuff. Yeah, it really makes you wonder if the writer himself actually like read up on like a science book or talked to anyone that had to do with anything like that.
You know, or what if he was one of those like super big comic guys who parents said you have to go to school and become a astrophysicist, and he's like, you know what, this is my opportunity to take my astrophysicism and turn it into a comic book, and he did it.
Yeah. Well, today they call you nerds for whatever, but that was like what nerds was doing back then. They're into space and like how we're gonna do this, and and like I don't know. I think that has a lot to do with it, and the people that would read comics and stuff would probably, I don't know, comics I think were a little different back then. Oh, you know what? It does say for mature readers on the front, so it might have been made for adults.
That's just because of Billy's face, man. Like...
Yeah. I mean, it's like now, like people know, like you make like an action movie or something, and it's rated R. You're making it for teenagers.
Right? Of course, yeah.
That's what you're making it for.
So man, I remember it was such a big deal that Deadpool was rated R, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the movies to see Deadpool. It was like a high school cafeteria in there. Like, this is not at all what I expected.
Yep. So they might have been onto that back then too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this first one for sure. This first whole entire book was good.
So overall, Fogbreaker, what would you rate this book?
Okay, the scale is 1 to 5. Let's see. I'm going to go a surprising 3.5 out of 5. And it may have been for my own expectations. I expected like 6 tales of horror, and it was like it was. I loved the whole book, but it was not a horrifying book from beginning to end.
Yeah.
But there was something in almost every story that I was like, I like this, I like this, I like this, I like this. If not liking the whole story. So yeah, almost a 4 out of 5. Probably a 4 out of 5 if I was in a better mood.
Yeah.
What about you, Robert?
I read a lot of this stuff. That's what I'm saying. So I'm gonna have to say, like, I expected it. Like, I already know that that's how they used to do it. It was like a variety thing. Like, it's not always going to be 100% horror, or like what we think of as horror now. Like back then, I guess sci-fi type of stuff was horror to them. This was unknown. But yeah, I'm gonna say it's pretty good. I'm gonna say 4. I mean, it's gonna be hard to get a 5 from me, period. But it's, for these old books, definitely good. Not the best. I almost want to say a 3.5. Now I said that out loud, but I'm gonna go with the 4 since I said 4. I'll be more harsh next time.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're our Simon Cowell. Like you're the Simon Cowell of our group.
No, but I enjoyed it. I did. I mean, it's worth the read. It's worth the read.
I don't want to be Randy Jackson. I'm just gonna throw it out
there. Me, I would have to
You Paul Abdul.
No.
Hey, she had MC Scat Cat for a while,
I would have to give it a 4. I mean, look, because I'm looking at during that time period, like not as like during now, because if I looked at it like now at this time period, I'm like, oh well, it sucks because during all this stuff that we have now, but like during at that time period, all the stuff that they didn't have, it's a lot of great stuff, because during that time period they didn't know about space, so a lot of stuff to them was a mystery and was horror and suspenseful to them. So yeah, to me it's going to be a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. And I got, all right, and I will say the first story is my favorite.
Yep.
of the whole book.
Yep.
Yeah. The world's ugliest man. Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
We all agree.
Total. Yep. Absolutely.
Because that definitely speaks, true horror to me.
It set
good.
the tone.
Yeah,
It carried the horror flag for what ended up being the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
Willie was the most confusing story, like, because I couldn't figure out what happened to Willie at the end. Like, it kind of.
I like that one because of the art, but yeah.
Good artwork through the whole book. Like, it was.
Yeah. It was really good artwork.
Every story had different art, but it was all really, really good. Like, I liked all the different styles. Like, for Willie to be drawn like a Dick Tracy strip was like, it was a money decision, and it didn't feel like a knockoff. It just kind of felt like this was the tone that Dick Tracy has set for mobster stories. So this is what we're going to carry the torch through this story too. Even though it's not the same world. So solid. A1.
I mean, Willie was a good story, but I kind of felt that you had the sci-fi space stories that that was a horror suspense, but I felt Willie was kind of out of place during the whole book.
Yeah, it was.
Yep. It was the most out of place story in the book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was y'all's least favorite story?
Let's see. I'm gonna have to probably say the second to last one. The one that was longest that we just talked about.
The Exile to Death story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that bad. Like, that story itself, I would say probably would be like a 3. Like I said, like, the story itself wasn't that good, but the ideas were like really good, and the artists,
I would say that too. I mean, it would be one of those things that it would have been great if they took that story and made a whole book of itself, because it had great potential, but I mean, they were just cramming so much into one.
That's what it felt like.
Because it's like, okay, we're in the future, and all of a sudden we just went from like in this one place, and we just traveled all this thousands of miles and just ended up to this one area. It's like, okay, how did you just get to this one area where like you have these lizards who are like pretty much taking over the whole world? It's like
Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, it's like basically show how your whole journey. It's like show the journey of how you got there. It's like, don't skip everything. Show the process.
It never felt like the story had a hero. It felt like they needed to like go when they got forward in time. They needed to like find a superhero who was able to travel back in time. They just walked out into the future, ducked a couple of rocks, grabbed a tablet, flipped the time machine switch, and said, "Hey, we were right." And they were like, "Oh yeah, okay." So
you're
the champions now.
I mean, it was good artwork, but I felt that it was.
Yeah, it was. It
have
like
them review more.
Middle piece.
Yeah,
like because, like I said, it's like just totally generic. Like everything happens perfectly, like how it's supposed to, and so it's like, I understand. A lot of stuff back then, like comics were just like you buy it and throw it away, and it was like a newspaper or something. So it wasn't like. But
Ogre, like when you think about it, like how you mentioned the guy's hand like busting through the glass. Excuse me. I wonder if that story was like had a completely different script at one time, because it would have been easy to change the tablets, like what the tablet said, and it would have been easy to take something out of that guy's hand and change up the colors a little bit. Like, I wonder if that was like just a story that they had, like they just needed to like throw in like 8 or 9 pages at the end of a book and like stuff it in there, and they just switched up the colors and edit some things out.
Like you said with the tablet, like the picture, his arm is in the way.
It's the most photoshopped 50s picture that you could ever imagine,
Like his arm is in the way, but it's still, you could still read the entire thing of what it said. Like,
right, yeah.
That little part kind of, was like, what happened there?
I'm so glad I wasn't the only person. It's like, as soon as you mention a fist, I'm like, okay, I have confidence now. I can say it without sounding like I'm complaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know. But
good stuff,
like
though.
you said, like his hand was like that, like he was holding something. He just took it out or something, or
right.
maybe I don't know. It's just one of them funny little things, you know. It's like,
Yep.
you know, seeing a cup on a table in a movie or something that ain't supposed to be there or whatever.
right.
But I mean, some of the stuff that they did was like really good on it. I mean, besides seeing like them picking up stuff, I like how they did the lizard in the beginning. The lizard, they did a pretty decent job on the scales. Like that's really good. I like it.
Yeah, I actually was going to mention that. Yeah.
I love everything about like, that first panel. It's just a cool picture.
Too, you know?
Yeah, it's a really great panel.
Yeah, it's solid. It's got everything
with the lizard, and then they get to the future, and then it's like the huge lizards and stuff.
It's got those cool like these are the like this whole like this story is like those old school Incredible Hulk colors. You know, it's like just like when you think of like old school Incredible Hulk books, like this is what the color pattern.
Yeah, they only had so many colors back then.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly.
That would print, you know.
I miss comic book pages like feeling like paper, you know, like I used to go to
actually, you know, that's why the Incredible Hulk was gray. I mean green because he was written as gray, but it was like it just got so muddy looking on the page that you know they need to make them pop. So
Bob Ross, man, happy accidents, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was bright purple paint.
Right.
Bright purple.
I love that stuff. Those two colors together are like my favorites. Like
yeah. I used to love Dr. Doom's green on his robe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are always good color combos.
Frank said the newsprint style was always was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you are like you're like the newsprint like Renaissance.
It's like
man.
the limitation, man. That's what I like about it. I gotta have something limiting, you know. If I can do anything, then I would do nothing. I gotta have some chains on me, you know.
You're forced to find like these super dynamic, like bouncing colors in like a limited palette, like which, like you said, it's a cool challenge, but you're rewarded for like look at your stuff, man. It's like you're always rewarded for it at the end. Like it pops the drawings just enough.
You know, there's a lot of people that do it and stuff. I mean, they got like these programs and stuff, but it's like you know, like I just like a lot of it's just a waste of money. I'll be honest.
Right? Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
it's figure out how to do these things like you know a different way, but
yeah, Ogre is like a pro workaround machine. Like
I know.
It's awesome.
I'm one of the people that like if there's another way to do it for free, I'm doing it. I'm cheap.
Right. If we were the X-Men, like you'd be like our Forge.
Right.
Yeah, dude. I'm you don't have anything Critter or Gimp.
Right. Yeah. I could never figure out how to use those programs, man. Like,
Critter's great. That's what I use.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we got on the docket, Mr. Ronnie? What's going on next week?
So you guys want to who wants to tell people what we got going on next week?
You can't, Ogre. You tell them.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So
scoop them.
One of our old buddies from Met Around doing 100 Days of Comics and all this stuff, Mr. Russ Leach, sent us a complimentary book that he worked on, and we're gonna read through that and we're gonna rate it. And I'm gonna be Simon Cowell. You're my buddy, but you know you're gonna get it. But I can already tell you the art's great, and I know. So you don't have to worry about that part.
And we'll send I'll send you when it comes close to that time, I'll send a link to where people could buy it and, you know, read it and everything. And pre-warning, unlike the 50s, this does have like some nudity in it. So, you know.
We're going all over, man. Look.
Right? I mean, this is horror comics. You know, we're going to be covering all types of genre here.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's oh man. You know, we might do some Junji Ito or
exactly.
or Jason's new favorite. What's his name? Can't remember.
Matane. What is his last name?
But
hold on,
let
me look at the book
and all that stuff. So we're taking it all in. If
it's got an update.
Art, we're doing it.
Yeah. And maybe even because we all write horror, so maybe we'll even talk about our own horror stuff.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, it's at 55. We're gonna cut off there.
Gravedigger is calling us again.
Does anybody want to promote anything before we leave?
Instagram, Fallbreaker Studios. Follow. Give me a follow.
Robert Ogre, YouTube. I got some videos in the works.
Right.
They'll be getting uploaded soon. As soon as I get a script.
All right. And I And I am Ronnie Gunter, Crimson Owl Comics, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming along, and thanks, Frank, for commenting in the chats. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye.
Later.
Bye. Cool.